Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now. Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. Friday morning, what an absolutely phenomenal week we've had. We had the US federal election. We've had Bitcoin hitting new all-time highs, October production results, plus a number of key earnings interviews on the channel. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing all of that and more with our resident Bitcoin mining analyst, Anthony Power. Before we get into it though, take a second, smash the like button. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. We just crossed 46,000 subscribers. We'd love to have you as part of the community. And finally, leave a comment. Let me know how you're feeling about Bitcoin right now, your portfolio overall, and your outlook for the final few months of 2024. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, guys, so that's right. Midday Friday, we've made it through another trading week, and what a fantastic week it's been. I said in the intro, Anthony, we've had some huge developments on the political front. Bitcoin's hit all-time highs. We had a number of high-profile earnings interviews on the channel, a huge amount of October production results, a couple more of which we actually have in today's video. Great week across the board. How are you feeling going into the weekend here?
Been a great week, feeling really good. It's been a great month. The last month's been phenomenal for mining companies. In fact, we can probably tie it back to the date we started the competition, and we look at those charts and look at the way some of those stocks have risen. We're talking 70, 80%, 3 or 4 of those stocks over that sort of 5-week period. It's been immense. And Bitcoin, as it approaches another all-time high today, effectively says that everyone's in profit in Bitcoin now. So no, really good feeling. Great result for the election for Bitcoin, because I don't think it would matter too much either way. But I think the fact that President Trump's back in and his support for Bitcoin, that just makes it a little bit easier. And yes, there'll be some regulation over the next few years to make sure retail investors are covered. But I don't see any pullback on this. I think it's just momentum, and we'll cover a lot more about that momentum shortly.
Yeah, we certainly will. I want to get into the political aspect here in a second. We also wanted to talk about the ETFs, as we haven't talked about them in a few days. But before we do, let's talk about Bitcoin price itself. So when I pulled this screenshot, we were flirting with 76,500. I think you have it live on your screen there, Anthony. Sounds like continuing to push up. I have a strong feeling that we're going to see some new all-time highs over the weekend here. And I've been thinking about it nearly every night as I lay there not sleeping, watching the price of Bitcoin. I really don't know what could stand in the way of Bitcoin adoption from now until the inauguration of President Trump here. It seems there's so many catalysts moving in the right direction. We're finally starting to get that recognition from Main Street, Wall Street, the FOMO we've talked about on the channel. It really does seem like all of our thoughts and thesis here has come to fruition, Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking this morning, I'm sort of back to what I was feeling in very early months of 2021, when we saw, Bitcoin and the mining stocks really take off during that period there. And we're seeing a little bit of that now. Some of these movements, we've talked about the volatility of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is volatile, but it's not as volatile as the mining stocks. They can really move. And we saw the likes of Cypher just on one day this week move up 30%. Now, equally, they can also move down by that percentage as well. So it's not for the faint-hearted. But you know what? It's a great community, the retail investors. There's a lot of information out there. They get access to a lot more information than other public companies prepared to give out. I mean, we're so fortunate we get to speak to all these CEOs of all these major mining companies on a regular basis. And even this week we've had the likes of Jason Les, we've had the likes of Adam Sullivan on the podcast. 2 excellent interviews. If you've not watched those, spend 20 minutes, half an hour, have a look through those, because there's a lot of information in there Adam last night, suggested that, their strategy, and if they get all their ducks in a row, they'll be a $30 billion company. Now, today, they're about $4.5 billion. So that's an upside of about 7x of where they are at the moment. And he can back that up because he's got a contract worth about 8.7 billion. And also he highlighted during that conversation last night, I mean, they publicly said they're looking to use an extra 70 megawatts for HPC. He actually said there's another site now with another 66 megawatts. That's like 140 megawatts close to of HPC for another client potentially. And if you're looking at the same types of numbers, that will take that 8.7 million and make it well in excess of probably 11 billion. And the profit margins are immense. Their current profit margins on the current contract are around about 71% for the duration of the contract. 71%. I mean, the Bitcoin price would have to be something like 160, 170,000 for miners to start getting that type of return through Bitcoin mining. And not to say that Bitcoin won't get there, but it's took a long time to get to 76,000. And so, can it get to 150,000, in the next year? Time will tell, but we're going in the right direction. And, we'll see how it goes over these next few months and into next year. I've got a lot of optimism that we'll see continuous all-time highs. I just don't know where it'll stop. But I listen to all these analysts and these technical analysts, and they have all the charts to back up their interpretation. And there's not many calling for it to be down. So they're all following the same line. And I'm sure we'll get a couple of them on the podcast in the next few weeks to highlight where they think Bitcoin might be by the end of the year. But we've all put our recommendations through the competition in there. You're sitting quite pretty at 99,999 because I think a lot of analysts on CNBC and other news programs have sort of said 100,000 by the end of the year. I'm a little bit more pessimistic. I've gone for 88,888. So we'll see how that finishes by the end of the year.
Yeah, see, you were telling me all the 8s were lucky when we were in Amsterdam. I think all the 9s are lucky. I've actually got a graphic here talking about a few of those analyst predictions coming in at 100,000. Of course, you're making reference to our Miner Madness competition. So not only am I the top analyst right now, but my Bitcoin tiebreaker prediction is looking pretty good as well. So to any of the analysts out there listening, bring it on here. You've got about a month and a half left. Now, a couple interesting points you brought up there, Anthony. I know that $30 billion comment really stuck out to you. We do a lot of different media on our program. We obviously have a newsletter, a website. We do interviews, analysis, competitions. We've got all different types of things. But one of the unique things about power mining is really the access you get to these CEOs. I think we've done now 60 or maybe 65 Bitcoin-related CEO interviews this year. And the thing that I really like about those, as opposed to reviewing news or discussion, analysis, Q&A, is you get net new information. And of course, it's not new public information. But when you talk to a CEO for an hour, you pick up on different things, body language, and of course, comments like that $30 billion statement from Adam Sullivan. Now, another one that he mentioned last night was in relation to tariffs. So as Trump comes into office, obviously this is very good for the price of Bitcoin, but there may be concerns about some of the tariffs associated with these data center or infrastructure components, a lot of which are sourced overseas. So I wanted to dig into that for a second, Anthony, because I really haven't heard anyone else talking about that, and see what your thoughts are there, at least at a knee-jerk reaction here.
Yeah, I mean, going back to when Trump came into power last time, he wanted to start putting tariffs on some of the overseas countries because he felt they weren't paying enough for American goods. And obviously what happens then is you get a reciprocation of that. So if I remember rightly, Riot were purchasing a lot of power assets from the UK. And so it takes a long time. Now, I'm in the UK and we always like to say the US is one of our closest allies, along with Canada as well. But when it comes to sort of like pound, shilling and pence, it's open season. So, it'll be interesting to see, I do understand where Adam's coming from. And depending on where these parts are produced, that could have an impact on delivery for, and affect their bottom line effectively.
Sure. Now, where I thought it gets interesting is you've talked on the channel about the cost of the actual mining rigs appreciating in a bull run. So we talked and we've seen miners actually purchasing fleet upgrades in previous bull cycles, paying well above market price. We've talked about that on the channel. That's one of the reasons these act as a leverage proxy play, is the value of the fleet goes up as well. So you've got to think, if tariffs are now imposed, again, the value of the existing fleet that's already landed here in the United States or Canada has to go up as well. So very interesting topic, right on the cutting edge or edge of developments here. Another one that really stood with me, again, that came out in an hour-long interview with the CEO of Riot, Jason Les, was talking about Corsicana's average power rates. Now, they're already in the 3 cent range, but he explained in the podcast that in order to qualify for 4CP, you have to be operational for a year. And because Corsicana has not met that 12-month milestone, they obviously aren't eligible for that program. And as a result, they don't get any discounts on their transmission fees. Now, Jason said those discounts can represent up to 90% of transmission fees, or in the neighborhood of about a cent per kilowatt hour. So that, to me, Anthony, you talk about facilities of scale. Corsicana is obviously one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the world. Already very competitive economics there. We're starting to see the operational hash rate come online. And if he can now cut that power rate down, which we've talked about as being so critically important, that one really stood out to me as well.
Absolutely. And if you think about when the energized Corsicana, I think it was very early April this year. So we're looking at the start of Q2 2025 for that anniversary to occur. That's when that impact will happen then, and the reduction in cost. Now, bear in mind, even with paying the full price, they've still been getting a really, really good energy deal at Corsicana. In fact, Jason articulated that this year, the Corsicana energy cost was cheaper than the Rockdale energy cost. And Rockdale's on a PPA, and it was on a PPA at a very, very low rate. I think it's about 3.9 cents a kilowatt hour. So that just puts that into context. I mean, he's got two of the largest sites in the world. Corsicana is probably the largest operating site. I mean, it's already at 400 megawatts. He's got another 600 megawatts to expand to. And Jason and the team at Riot have got the decision there whether to utilize that for further mining operations, or he was open to the conversation with some form of a hyperscaler who's prepared to come in and in the same way that CoreWeave have dealt with Core Scientific, provide some capital funding to refurbish, to build out the HPC data centers and run a contract like that. And then he's also got the second largest facility in the world, which is a Rockdale facility, and that's 700 megawatts. Now, we know there are other mining companies out there that have got, options for sites, but these sites are probably, grass at the moment with cows on them, and they're not developed at all. So, yes, IREN have got a couple of sites there, I think a 1 gigawatt site, a 1.4 gigawatt site, but they haven't broken ground in any of those sites yet. So, Corsicana, if you look at it now, I mean, it looks, the current photographs, and we've been there, how much change just in 3 or 4 months. And so it's going to be I think it's going to be a really interesting next 12 months for Riot Platforms. A couple of good points is, one, they're starting to produce relatively good operating monthly performance updates. We've had problems for the last 2 years. I mean, we've been banging our heads about, every time we get an update from Riot, it was like, the number of Bitcoin they should be mining compared to what they were mining there was a football field between the two. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing that gap close. We want to see it close, still got further closure, but we're seeing every month an increase of 2 or 3 exahash. And we've seen that happen now for the last three or 4 months. So they're getting now to a really good position. Next year is going to be interesting as they've completed all of their phase one. So all 400 megawatts up and running, get to the 35 exahash, which is their target hash rate. I think it's 34.9. Let's call it 35 to round it up. And then next year will be interesting if they go ahead and start advancing all their strategies into growing Bitcoin mining, or they start looking to deliver the HPC. And, we were there in June when Jason was adamant, no HPC, refused to take questions on the subject. But now, I think even he realizes it. If someone's going to come to you with that amount of money to deliver that service, you want to be part of it. And so, you're effectively, someone said to me today, I did a valuation of all the managers today, and he said, "Oh, why have you included Core Scientific? That they've got a HPC contract." And I responded saying, like, if I took all the companies that have got HPC ideas on their thing, there'd only be CleanSpark left on the bloody table. So, every miner apart from CleanSpark is avidly looking to get a contract in HPC. They won't tell you directly, but they'll want that deal. And Zach even turned around in Amsterdam and said, "Look, it's a fantastic deal, that Core Scientific." And I'm sure if CoreWeave had gone to CleanSpark and said, "Can you do something?" they would rub their hands together and come up with a plan to do something. Zach's a very bright, accountant. He's built that business up there, and he knows what he's doing, and he wouldn't turn that sort of money away there. If an offer that size comes in, I mean, we're not comparing this to miners building their own facilities, putting their own GPUs in and doing an on-demand service. That's a different type of strategy. We're talking about big hyperscalers who want data centers. They want good data centers that they can, use, put their own GPUs in and run their services from those there that have got power, great fiber connection, great water close by. So they fulfill all the criteria. And that's what Core Scientific got at the moment. And there's a few other miners out there that can deliver that type of service. Cypher can certainly, with their background in data centers, certainly fit that bracket as well. And TeraWulf are already sort of like moving into that space now. They've already got one project off the ground. They've got two other projects on the go at the moment. So you've got a couple of miners there. And then you've got the miners that are doing their own data centers on a smaller scale, could probably ramp those up now because they've got experience in building those types of data centers. So there's plenty of potential out there.
There certainly is. Now, we're going to come on to CleanSpark in a second. I know there was a lot of chatter last night about trading being halted. Seems like kind of a non-event, but we'll talk about that in a second. You bring up the data center expertise, and we had the team from Rosso on. They're the immersion experts. They've met with a lot of the data center design teams. And we heard last night Adam Sullivan talk about the value of human capital in this space. Not only is the land, the power, the infrastructure now extremely valuable and rare, but the people that know how to put it all together are as well. So again, a great example of why you want to listen to those interviews. Now, speaking of interviews, next week we have Ben on Wednesday from Bitfarms Q3 earnings. That's going to be a big one. We've had, I don't know how many people reach out asking the date and time for that. That's at 8:30 in the morning. Video will be going out around midday. Thursday, we have Hut 8 at 9 a.m. We're going to talk about Hut 8 next in the mid-morning update. They've been on an absolute tear under Asher's leadership. I think tripling their share price or something close to that, you said yesterday, Anthony, since he took over the helm there. And Soluna at noon on the 14th as well, Thursday. So a big week. And to top it off on Friday, we've got TeraWulf at 8 a.m. and then Gryphon at 1:30 in the afternoon. So a couple of double headers. I hope you get your sleep this weekend, Anthony, because we're going to be working overtime next week. Now, speaking of all these miners, let's get into the mid-morning miner update. A lot of those names I just mentioned are actually performing quite well today. Bit Digital performing well, Hive, Hut 8 doing well, which has kind of been the trend over the last few weeks here. What stands out to you today on the market update?
Today, it's effectively, there's 3 or 4 miners that are doing really well. You've already mentioned the likes of Hut. Hut are having another good morning today. Hive are up there as well. Bit Digital also topping the charts early today. Core Scientific is in positive territory. Bitdeer is in positive territory. And then you've got a number of miners that are, obviously maybe a little bit of profit taking. Soluna and Cypher probably, down 5% there. Obviously the standout one is CleanSpark at the moment, and that's not trading at the moment on the Nasdaq, and we'll come on to that now.
Yeah, so a lot of news about CleanSpark. This is one of the most popular, at least retail followed companies in the mining space. Now, they were halted late yesterday during trading. A lot of speculation, including myself, actually, about M&A saying, hey, maybe they made a big purchase, maybe they are getting bought out. We got a tweet out this morning from Matt Schultz, who's the chairman of CleanSpark. Sounds like more or less a non-event here, basically saying he's received an overwhelming amount of texts and DMs, obviously asking what's going on. And it sounds like it's actually more or less related to the warrants. So I'll let you get into that next here, Anthony.
Yeah, no, and this again, this is something that you wouldn't get in probably any other business space, really. We know that CleanSpark's one of the most popular shares out there. If you look at, two of the most popular are CleanSpark and IREN. We know that because the competition suggested most people were looking at those two stocks to do really well. And Matt, as he's an avid user of Twitter or X, and he's made it open that people can contact him through direct message or through on Twitter. And actually, he responded today. I was quite surprised he responded during this period, but he's basically saying nothing too much to worry about. The halt, which was imposed by the Nasdaq, is in relation to a number of outstanding warrants, and these are the CLSKW warrants, and the number of shares underlying those warrants. So the trading halt is not associated with anything to do with CleanSpark's business, operations, filings with the SEC, financial statements, or securities. So effectively, it's just it's just a halting proceedings. Hopefully, when it gets, usually it doesn't take long at all. Sometimes these halts happen within the day and they're back trading again there. But I checked just before the podcast and it was still halted at that point in time. So still offline at the moment, but probably back on Monday now as we're getting closer to the end of the day. But I don't see anything major with this. I would be disappointed if something was to come out, but he's been very clear in his statement there. It's related to one thing, and actually quite a few people had sort of guessed that was the process as well, because there was a number of charts going around showing the increased volatility of the warrants literally just before it was taken off. So thanks to Matt for clarifying that.
Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today. Most definitely. And thanks to X for being the go-to source. I've seen it's now the #1 news app in the world, and I definitely find myself going on there to find answers in real time. So again, great access to these CEOs, which is unique to this sector for sure. Now, before we get into the production updates, we've got two more for you guys to round out the week. I wanted to talk about two major catalysts. One of them, obviously, the political landscape here. The next is going to be the ETF inflows. So as Michael Saylor put it nicely in this AI generated tweet he posted, we now have a Bitcoin president. And being in Nashville with you, Anthony, we obviously saw firsthand some of the sentiment here around that strategic reserve. They've basically come out now and said they're looking to acquire up to 1 million Bitcoin over a structured multi-year period. So obviously a lot of catalysts coming in at a political stage here. How are you feeling now that the week's had a few days to settle out and we've kind of started to see how this may play out?
Yeah, no one's as bullish on Bitcoin as Michael Saylor, and he's probably had first-hand conversations with the president, as have a number of the mining CEOs, and so he'll fully understand what this means for this election result in terms of Bitcoin. We said before, nobody goes out and buys Bitcoin like MicroStrategy have done over the last 3 or 4 years. And they've, really grown their market capitalization and given their shareholders some real great returns in that short space of time. But the future looks, at the moment, it looks positive. There's no doubt about it. And we've talked already during this podcast about where the Bitcoin price could be at the end of this year or end of next year. As more and more adoption comes in, there's a limited amount of supply. The ETFs are buying Bitcoin greater than it's produced. Sometimes, some days they're buying like a month's production in one day. That's not sustainable because there's not enough Bitcoin out there. We know there's only 21 million. We're already at something like 93% of all the Bitcoin that's ever going to be produced has already been produced. It's like we're down to 7%, and that's going to take another 100 and, off my top of my head, another 116 years to do that. So, we're a long way to get the last 7% of Bitcoin. So most of the great majority of it's already out there. And we know from statistics, because people can tell when Bitcoin's leaving wallets, is that, a lot of Bitcoin hasn't moved in the last few years. I think that, some people were saying, 70% in last year, 50% in the last 2 years hasn't even moved. And then you also look at the fact that there is probably Bitcoin out there, significant amounts of Bitcoin, maybe as much as 15% of Bitcoin is lost. So people have purchased Bitcoin, they've forgotten their keys, security keys to access it. Or, we know some real stories in terms of people have had on their computers, the computer's been thrown away onto waste sites, and along with those waste sites has gone the Bitcoin. And so, anything up to about 15% has already gone missing. So that narrows that 21 million, probably down to about 17.5, 18 million. And then, you look at some of the big players in the game now. So you've got BlackRock and Fidelity and MicroStrategy, and some of the mining companies are still hodling quite a bit of Bitcoin out there. And then you've got the retail investors. There's not a lot of Bitcoin to go around. I'm not selling my Bitcoin. You're not selling your Bitcoin. So economics tells us that, if there's not enough supply out there to meet the demand, then the price will rise. And that's what we're seeing now. This year has been the year of adoption in terms of the big ETF. So when they were approved in January, the Bitcoin price was 42,000. The Bitcoin price today is heading towards 67,000. That's a $25,000 increase just within this year.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's quite incredible. And one of the remarks I remember in Nashville most clearly was Bitcoin is really a technology or a technological innovation, and we cannot solve 21st century problems with old 20th century technology. So super exciting. Great to see the adoption. I actually just hosted an interview with a small microcap company here in Canada. They look over building software, energy consumption, energy efficiency metrics. They've adopted a Bitcoin standard, purchasing $1 million of Bitcoin and now an additional $2 million purchase program. Interestingly enough, I also found an article on X last night, Anthony, I sent you when we were in Nashville waiting for Trump. It was about a 4-hour wait in the seating area. So we were alternating watching these seats, and the gentleman actually seated next to us was Tad Smith. He's the former CEO of Sotheby's International, which is obviously a huge auction house. He just did some great interviews. You can actually find the link associated below. We spent approximately 3 hours talking back and forth, and it's just so interesting to see people like this, and obviously this microcap CEO, all of the Bitcoin mining CEOs, Michael Saylor, all of these super smart people getting involved in the Bitcoin space, again, adding to these overall catalysts we're seeing. So in summary, you guys, phenomenal week for Bitcoin adoption, Bitcoin political policy, and obviously the miner production results, which we wanted to come on to next. So Anthony, I believe we have two today, Hive and Soluna. I'll let you take your pick, which one we want to talk about first.
Yeah, so just before we get into Hive, I thought I'd highlight the fact that the Bitcoin price has gone above $77,000. That's another all-time high today. And looking at the miners, more of them are starting to turn to green. So another positive day there. But if we go to Hive's production for the month, and we know when we get a Hive production, we know what to expect, to be honest with you now. They've been one of the top two operators for the last 4 years. Along with Bitfarms. In terms of their mining for October, they mined 117 Bitcoin, which was a 4% increase on September. And effectively, if you look at the fact there was an extra day, that probably accounts for most of that increase there. And the reason I say that is because their hash rate their plugged-in hash rate and their operational hash rate was 5.6, 5.3 respectively. So they're nearly operating at full capacity in terms of, limited curtailment. Now, the great thing about Hive is they've got a hodl there, and they've been constantly adding to that hodl for over a great period now, and their hodl's at 2,624. That's got a valuation at the end of the end of October, when the Bitcoin price was only 70,000. So today it's 77,000. That had a valuation then of $184 million. So that's a great part of Treasury. When you look at the market capitalization of Hive, you've got to look at it's around 450, maybe edging towards 500 million. And they've got well over $200 million in their treasury. So again, the enterprise value of the Hive is really, really low. And for a company that's doing, 5.5 exahash at the moment, certainly compared to peers is a really undervalued miner. In terms of growth, we know that they started work now on their sites in Paraguay, and by this time next year they'll have a hash rate of more than double where they are at the moment. It's expected to go to about 12 to 13 exahash, and their target, and they've laid this target down now, is to have 2% of the global hash rate at all times. So 2% would be around about, looking at today, between 12 and 13 exahash. So they're on target to do that. Now we know they've got another business as well, which they've been in for quite a long time, since their Ethereum mining days. They've got a HPC business which has been growing with in line with their strategy. And so, when we get them on the podcast with their earnings, we'll expect to hear more updates from that there. They've reached all their targets up to now. The next target is to basically start achieving $250,000 per week, and they're well on the way to doing that now. So, a good update as always from Hive. In terms of where they'll finish in the year-to-date table, they're still second behind Bitfarms, but those two have been interchangeable. I think the 2021 and 2022 were Hive were top, and 2023 and 2024 Bitfarms have been top these last sort of 18, 20 months. But there's nothing between them. Honestly, it's a very, very slim margin between both miners. So great operational update as always, but as always, what we expect it to be.
Yeah, it most definitely was. And we have the team from Hive on not this Monday, but the following November 18th to talk about earnings. Now, the next one up here is Soluna, another pretty respectable increase month over month in terms of Bitcoin produced, I think around 7%. The other nice thing here is fleet efficiency in the mid 20s, so kind of in the mid pack. Maybe we can walk through this one as well.
Yeah, we can. And just before I go on to this, another part of the Hive update is their efficiency was improved to 22.1. And bear in mind, they're doing that with the same machines. So it's not about bringing in new machines. They're basically understanding how to operate these machines and get the most out of these machines at the most efficient level. So they might be underclocking some of these machines to deliver that really good efficiency. But Soluna equally have, a good efficiency rate. 26 is really good. I mean, we had a couple of miners this week on, where we're going through the podcast, who are at sort of like 31, 32. And we know that at the top end of the scale, the miner to beat at the moment is IREN. But effectively, they've literally replaced their whole fleet with the latest S21. So, that's going to take some beating. CleanSpark are trying to get on the heels of that, but that'll take a long way for them to get to 16. And by the time they get to 16, IREN might have found a new machine they can go and buy and change it again. But 26 for Soluna, one of the smaller miners, but have a good efficient fleet. And, we know that, although they're a small miner, they're sort of spread out across a number of different business models. Self-mining being one of the smallest parts of their businesses, they do have a hosting business, which is more than twice the size of their self-mining. They're also moving into HPC, and they've already got a project that's proof of concept, so that can ramp out across other projects now. And, for a company with a market cap of around about 28, 29 million, they're constantly punching above their weight. And it'd be interesting to get John's perception on that next week on the podcast. But 16 Bitcoin mined during the month of October. They do sell their Bitcoin on a daily basis, so there's no hodl there. in terms of where they sit within in the production tables, they're about midway. So not one of the worst and not the best either, but they're certainly performing admirably against a really good selection of miners in our criteria.
Yeah, totally agree there. Looking forward to catching up with John as always on the program. So there you have it, you guys, the end of a very successful trading week, at least if you're invested in the Bitcoin proxies. We've had a number of big press releases. We've had October production results, some high profile interviews that are really just the start of what's to come next week and following. And to finish it all off, Bitcoin is continuing to push higher, flirting with all-time highs going into the weekend. So Anthony, I'll say this is a good week in the books for us at Power Mining Analysis. Make sure you guys check out the live update on Miner Madness. Leave a comment in the section below. Let us know how your portfolio performed this week. And if you're up in the green, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate the support. Have a great weekend. We'll see you here Monday.